Welcome to part 2 of the cell energy notes that we first looked at for cellular respiration and the mitochondria. So halfway down those notes, you will find the beginning of photosynthesis. And photosynthesis has photo in there, which means light from the sun, and is going to synthesize. That word means to make, and it's going to make its food, and the food that it makes is glucose. So that's the quick overview. It happens in plants. Now, most plants are very strong in green, but they also have a multitude of other colors called pigments. You notice in the fall when leaves change colors, it's because the chlorophyll, the green color, the green pigment in leaves, and sometimes in little twigs or even in the shoots of the plant. You'll notice right here, it's got green. So look around campus and you will see that there's green not only on leaves, but sometimes on the little branches as well, depending on the species of plant and where they find themselves in what type of environment. So leaves are broad when rain is plentiful and it's not too hot where they're going to dry out. Here in California, we are in a semi-arid desert, and that means that they can dry out pretty easily. So they have quite a number of mechanisms to try to prevent themselves from drying out. I'll go over a few of them. So let's move on. So the object of photosynthesis is to make fuel, and humans, we can harvest plants, and that glucose and the building blocks of the plants themselves can be turned into fuels. The fuel starts as glucose, but we can change those from these plants that are alive and turn it into ethanol. So that's a type of alcohol that's made from plants like wheat and corn. And if you look at the gas station pumps, they will tell you if it contains some biofuels that came from plants. It will say 10% ethanol. It makes the gasoline a little bit cheaper, and it is taking a non-renewable resource of fossil fuels and adding a little bit of renewable resource that can grow again from a plant. So that is pretty cool. Check it out. All life on the planet is solar powered. So plants capture the energy from the sun, and right here in this lower picture, and they're going to make sugars. And those sugars are going to be what herbivores eat. Carnivores eat the herbivores. So that energy is going up the food chain. And it all started with the primary production, the primary producers of plants. So as we mentioned, photosynthesis powers all life on the planet. So the word autotroph means that you are a self-feeder. Auto means self, and troph means feed. We talked about the trophic levels here at the beginning of the semester. That pyramid, each level right here is a trophic level or a feeding level. It starts with the autotrophs right there. The herbivores are going to be in the second, and then the first carnivore and the second carnivore, and in most cases there's 3 carnivores in a ecosystem. And so these are key terms that we've seen before. If they're an autotroph and they use the sun to make their own food, they're called photoautotrophs, using the energy of sunlight. But you might recall that there are one other types of self-feeders, and those were chemiautotrophs. Down at the bottom of the ocean, in the absence of light, they can capture some of those chemicals coming out of these cracks in the ocean floor, And so instead of using light, they use chemicals. But we're talking about using the power of the sun, kind of like a solar panel. So you can be an autotroph if you are a single-celled organism. That would be called a phytoplankton. So these are the primary producers over in the ocean. And then there are some bacteria that are also photoautotrophs. Do you remember from our previous notes, we talked about where the chloroplast and the mitochondria came from? Well, the chloroplast is theorized to have come from a photosynthetic bacteria that got engulfed by a big eukaryotic cell, and they got inside of a cell. If that's the case, the chloroplast now would have a double membrane, which is what it does. So double membraned chloroplasts and mitochondria have evidence that they were free living and they were engulfed. Everything that gets engulfed by a eukaryotic cell would have that outer membrane that was their cell membrane at one point. Let's go over the structure of leaves. We're actually going to have a little mini lab here on our next class, and you are going to take a look under the microscope at the inside of a leaf. It's really cool. So it's so cool that you can see this level of detail under the microscope. First of all, it's very thin. It really has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers of cells. This is the top of the leaf, and this is the bottom of the leaf. Now, we know that plants are going to give off oxygen. There it is. And we also know that plants need to take in carbon dioxide right there. So the gas enters the leaf only on the underside of the leaf through these holes called stomas. These stomas are guarded by these ballooning cells that you see right here. These can swell up. These are called guard cells, and when they swell up, they're going to close that gap right there. When they lose their water, then they will have the opening for the gases to come through. And the gases make their way in these 2 levels of cells. The 2 levels of cells where photosynthesis occurs is called the mesophyll. Meso really is like in the middle of the leaf. It's protected by hard outer layers called cuticles. And this here is like waterproofing. But by waterproofing, I also mean that it's airtight. So the only way for the gases to come in are through these holes right here. So now those plants that are living in a semi-arid desert like us, the leaves are going to be small to make sure that they're going to avoid being desiccated or drying out. And they're going to close these during the day when it's 100 degrees out. They would lose their water right through here as well. So in order to keep themselves watertight so that they don't dry out and die on 100-degree day, they will keep themselves closed, like the windows closed in a house, the doors closed, and then it's going to keep the moisture in. So that's pretty cool. See this purple vein right here? It's just purple to show you that they have a vascular system like animals. Have blood vessels that you can see sometimes near your ankles or the top of your hands, your wrists where the skin is thin. You can see our veins. Well, plants also have veins. These are going to carry water, and plants make sugar, so some of these are going to carry sugar. Xylem and phloem is what they're called. And so you can see these veins on the leaf. This is where water is going to come all the way from the roots. Sugar is made up here in the leaf, and the sugar is going to be transported down, usually into the roots. So like a potato, that is sugar that was made in the leaf and carried down to the plants. So these veins run from the leaves all the way down to the roots, and they're connected. Now you have an overview. So take a look at this box that you see right here. We're going to zoom in on a cell where photosynthesis takes place. So here is one such cell. This is the cell membrane, and it's also got the, if green shows up, great. In green, right up against the cell membrane, it's the cell wall. This is made out of a hard carbohydrate called cellulose, and it allows plants to be right-angled, usually square. Animal cells are round, but plant cells can be square because of that cell wall. Are you taking extra notes? Don't focus just on filling in words that are here, but make sure you have the big picture of how the structure is put together, and practice your notes. Practice your notes with things that you see up here in the menu. Right straight above this arrow is the thing called tape, and you could tape over things, and then you could tap on it and it reveals. So it's one way of reviewing your notes, but make sure that you really know your script. Like you're an actor in a movie, they give you the script that you need to memorize, and you can ad-lib, kind of make it so that's natural for you, and be able to zoom in and explain things in a picture. Don't just go for the basic learning of definitions. You need to know that so that you can sound intelligent and be able to explain things succinctly with words that have a full sentence definition, but go for understanding and practice it. Do not just scan your notes, but practice explaining it like you're tutoring or teaching. So we are now zoomed in on one cell, and the place where photosynthesis takes place, it is right over here in the organelle called the chloroplast. So now we are zooming in on one chloroplast. It looks like an entire cell. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. It looks like an entire cell, but it's actually just the organelle inside the cell. This is the big cell wrapped in cell membrane and the cell wall, and this is what one entire chloroplast looked like. Recall from the previous slide that these really were thought to be self-living bacteria that got engulfed. So the outer membrane that you see, the outer membrane is this one. It is wrapping up the inner membrane. So the inner membrane is this one, and the outer membrane is to the right. Inside these two membranes are a stack of membranes, another stack of membranes called the granum. This is where part of the photosynthesis takes place in two parts. So one part happens in the granum, the other part happens in this space right here called the stroma. It's the fluid-filled space outside of the stack of granum. You know, the granum looked like a stack of pancakes. And each pancake, so this is a stack of pancakes, as you can see right here, or Thin Mint cookies from Girl Scouts, right? And the entire sleeve of pancakes or cookies, that is called the granum, as you can see. An individual pancake, it's called a thylakoid. So one pancake. And the important thing for you is that these membranes is where the light reactions and where the sun's photons are going to be captured to get the whole party started. So make sure that you work on the key terms. Your test is going to be next week, so you need to practice this more than the night before. If you want to up your game, get a better result on your quizzes and the final exam also coming up, you need to have a game plan and practice it. If you ignore it, do not be surprised if you get a D or an F on the quiz. You can't pass without preparing. So let's go over the 2 stages. One stage needs light. It's called light dependent. The second one does not need light, and it's called light independent. In my day when we learned this was called the light reaction, and this one was called the dark reaction. But they got rid of the word dark reaction because it sounds like it can only happen in the dark. It can happen in the dark. It can happen in the day. It just doesn't need light. So they call it the light independent reaction. They both need each other. So they have to produce and help the next stage out. And so we're going to go over these, starting with light. Here's the overview. I recommend that you understand all these slides, then zoom in on this picture, and in 5 minutes, explain it just by looking at the picture. Practice your script, which is on the slides, but practice it. Actually say it out loud like I'm doing right now. I swipe down from the upper right-hand corner, and I clicked on that blinking icon down there, made sure that the microphone was turned on, and I hit record, and then do a voiceover just on picture like this. If you can do that without reading it, you're in great shape. If you don't know what to say, then go back to these slides and practice it. So I'm going to circle the light reaction. It's shown right here, and it is this half right there like that. And then the dark reaction, or the light independent reaction, it is also these objects in the center, and it's over on that side. Both of which happen inside of the chloroplast. One of them, the light reaction, is happening in the thylakoids, and the whole stack here is called the granum. And the other one is happening in what is called the stroma, which is like the liquid part inside of the chloroplast. So we're going to go over the light reaction. The light reaction is so called because it is going to capture the sun's energy. The sun's energy is in wavelengths of visible light. So it is Roy G. Biv. Write that down. R stands for red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Red is a long wavelength of light. Blue, indigo, and violet are short wavelengths of light. And you're pretty familiar with ocean waves. So if you have a long wavelength from crest, trough to crest, that's one wavelength right there. If it's long, it's got big distance between the two peaks. And the green pigment here, it is called chlorophyll. The chlorophyll, it is going to absorb photons of light. If you see green, if you see a leaf as green, that green wavelength of light is coming back to your eye. So the leaves are not absorbing green wavelengths of light. They are actually absorbing like blue. I was erasing there. Green, blue, indigo, violet. They're actually absorbing blues and orange and yellow. Isn't that interesting? You see colors because that bounces back to your eye and the object would be absorbing it. So black objects are absorbing almost every wavelength of light, and so you don't see anything coming back to you. White isn't absorbing, it is making everything come back. So if you are looking at red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet all together, that would be white light. So the key here is that the sunlight is going to do something to the atoms that are in chlorophyll. Let's draw a quick atom right here with the nucleus. Inside the nucleus, you have positive protons and you have neutrons. And then orbiting that, you have electrons. There's one orbit of an electron. And I'm going to do a second orbit of electrons. And I'll do E as in minuses. So there's 2 electrons in the first orbit. And I'll draw some electrons here, like 7 of them in the second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So what does the photon of light do? Check this out. Here's the photon of light. It's going to strike these electrons. And you see how it says that it is going to generate high energy electrons. The electron was already there, but it's going to add more energy from the sunlight. And what it does is it makes these electrons pop out to a further electron orbit that didn't exist. The farther electron gets away from its nucleus, the more energy it has. So that high energy electron is right there. It pops out farther away from its nucleus. Positive protons are holding the electrons close in. The farther you get away, the more likely that electron is going to be lost completely. So what happens when the light strikes the atoms of the green chlorophyll here inside of the granum? It is going to pop the electrons farther away from them, and the electrons are lost from chlorophyll. So that's how plants do their magic. The high energy of the light from the sun pops out these electrons from chlorophyll, and they're lost from chlorophyll. It produces electricity. And these electrons that are lost from chlorophyll, they're going to go down the membrane, just like we saw before in the chloroplast, if you recall. Electricity is flowing down the membrane. And just like before, the electricity is going to power active transport, charging up the intermembrane space inside the granum. And it is going to then pack up a lot of hydrogens in this space that are going to be used to make ATP. And high energy electrons are going to be put in electron carriers and sent to the next phase. So take a look back up here. What is coming out of the light reactions? It is shown in this picture. I'll get rid of all of my scribbles right here to show you that these electrons that were excited by light and leaving chlorophyll are now going into the electron carrier right there. Electrons are excited, they leave chlorophyll, and they go into electron carrier. And they're going to be sent over here and dropped off. I just described how that free-flowing electricity is going to power active transport to generate a concentration gradient of hydrogens in this space, piling up hydrogens in here by active transport across this membrane. It's going to now have a fully charged space that is going to be harnessed to make ATP in ATP synthase. So these are the 2 energy molecules that come out of the light reaction. ATP itself and this electron carrier. So think about the light reaction providing the power. It's providing the power for this engine over here. This engine is going to then crank out sugar, but it needs to have the energy from the sun in the light reaction. So that was the overview. You don't have this, but you could use it as a script to understand what's going on here. So I'll tell you this story. I'll try to do it in 4 sentences. Step number 1, sentence number 1, light strikes chlorophyll. And the chlorophyll is right in here, and it's going to strip the electrons out of chlorophyll, and they're going to be passed like a hot potato down the thylakoid membrane, and they are going to flow all the way over here into the electron carrier, and off they go to the next phase called the light independent. The second thing that has to happen is, if you noticed, we were stripping electrons out of here. How long do you think chlorophyll can last if you keep stripping its electrons out? So you are going to split water. You're going to take the electrons out of water and bring them back to chlorophyll. That is step number 2. When you strip the electron out of water, you're left with oxygen that the plant gives off, and that gas is what we breathe in. After stripping water, you have all these hydrogens as well. As the electricity was flowing through, as the electrons were passing by the membrane, it actively pumped hydrogens into this space. These hydrogens are now highly concentrated in this area. We've now made a battery. The last thing that happens is we're going to open up ATP synthase. It's going to flow down here by facilitated diffusion. This sucker spins, provides the energy to add 1-phosphate onto ADP to make ATP, the other energy molecule. So the energy that is coming out of the light-independent reactions, the light-dependent reactions is right here, number 1, the electron carrier, and number 2, ATP. Yeah, it's a lot of detail if you look at for the first time, but hit record and practice it. Back to the overview. What comes out of the light reaction? ATP and the electron carrier. If you can wrap your mind around that, you're going to be in great shape for the upcoming quiz. We're keeping high level here. All right, don't get dizzy as I'm zipping around. I'm going to skip those breakdown because I kind of showed it to you as we went. Step 2, the light independent reaction. At this point, no one should be calling this stage the dark reaction. That is an antiquated way of saying the light independent reaction. It happens during the day and at night. It just doesn't need sunlight. So it's going to use the power that was provided, the energy ATP and the electron carrier that came from the first stage, and it's going to use that energy that you see right down here. The electron carrier and ATP are coming into the cycle, and plants are taking in carbon, and they need energy and carbon, and they are going to make sugar. That's what you need to know about the Calvin cycle. So the bullet says plants have to take in carbon dioxide from those holes on the underside of the leaf. They need the energy that came from the light reaction. And with that, they're going to go through a series of chemical reactions, and they're going to make sugar. How many carbons does sugar have? Glucose has 6 carbons. So guess how many CO2s have to come in? 6. This cycle has to spin 6 times in order to make a 6 carbon. molecule. That's the overview. That's all you need to know. This picture right here with Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes, this is the Calvin cycle. And what does it need? It needs the energy right here from the light reaction. Rx stands for reaction. It's going to use up this energy, so this energy right here is depleted when it's called ADP, and this empty electron carrier that has to go back to the light reaction to get charged up again. Plants need to take in the gas of carbon dioxide, and they are going to make a solid sugar, and that is glucose. That's your script. You can ad-lib the rest of the detail, but that is going to get you an A. So another good overview. Hit record on this guy and talk about the two reactions. The light reactions over here and the light independent reaction. Light independent reaction over here. The light reaction is going to make energy of ATP in the electron carrier that is required in the Calvin cycle. Plants take in 6 carbon dioxides for every 1 sugar that they make. And so this has to go around 6 times. Each time it's adding another carbon so that it can make 1 sugar molecule. And by the way, plants can now make anything that they need. They can also make a protein down here from the sugar. They can also make lipids. So plants also need to make products of proteins and lipids. Some of the biggest, strongest animals on the planet can get all their protein by eating plants that are rich in protein. So think about the gorilla. That guy doesn't eat animal protein. It eats plant protein. So herbivores, they can get their protein source by plants. So this is a diagram that is over in your textbook. This is chapter 7. And this happens to be the last page. I think it's 7.5, maybe 7.6. But you are going to drag these in the right spot. So this is the light-dependent reaction. Nope, that's not the right word. Let me take that back. This is the light reaction. That word goes right there. Light is right up there. This is the thylakoid right there. And so on. So here's the answer key. But it's really good practice for you to go through moving these around, and you could be saying things out loud. If you just put it in your brain and silently you think you're going through it, you're actually just doing a review and you're not standing on your own. You actually have to have the words come out of your mouth, just like you're on stage, just like you're an athlete actually performing the drill instead of just thinking about the drill. So raise your grade on your quizzes by actually getting involved into it, and take a blank note and write on it just like I've demonstrated. That will really get you there. What's the significance of photosynthesis? We've pretty much gone over this already. It provides oxygen. It's giving off that oxygen for living things. It needs to take in carbon dioxide. So you may have heard of global warming, and global warming is caused by greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases come from burning fossil fuels. So when you burn fossil fuels, you're putting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Raising that is going to make the temperature rise in our planet. So how do you offset rising levels of CO2 in the atmosphere? Plant more plants. Funny how it's a verb and a noun. Make sure we're not cutting down plants without replacing them. So some companies will buy carbon credits. Airplanes are notorious for burning a lot of fossil fuels, and they put a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere, just like cars. So they're good stewards of the planet, and they are going to plant more trees. And they say, hey, yeah, we're burning and contributing to a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere, but we're also planting, and our plants are then taking the carbon back out of the atmosphere. And there you go. You've gone through your notes one time. You really need to go through it 3 or 4 times until you get your script down. And don't forget to practice. And it won't be long before you're really good at practice, and you can go through and get your knowledge quickly. All right. Take care, everybody. All the best.